hold music. You want to avoid it, and so do your customers. So say goodbye to hold music and hello to faster, smarter support with Salesforce. Make service more personal and agents more productive using built-in trusted AI. Then watch costs and wait times drop and satisfaction soar. Support customers in a whole new way with Service GPT. Learn how at salesforce.com/service GPT.
We are Bragg, makers of the tried and true apple cider vinegar that you've had in your cabinet for as long as you've had a cabinet. And you trust that bottle sitting in your cabinet because we were in your mom's cabinet and her mom's cabinet. You use us as a wellness drink. Your mom used us in salad dressing. Her mom's mom used us as glass cleaner. And while there are many ways to use us, one thing is always the same, our recipe. It has never changed since we've been put in cabinets. Bragg, it's not weird if it works.
Welcome back to the NatureBacked podcast, where we are talking with investors about their visions of the new green world. We took a small autumn break, but we are back and have some great episodes lined up for you. My name is Tarmo Birki, and in this episode I am talking with Yoann Berno from Climentum Capital.
Hey there! I hope you're enjoying the NatureBacked podcast. I'm Merit, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Single Earth, and we're a team of more than 70 people building a nature-backed economy. And if that sounds crazy enough for you, then join us. Sign up at single.earth to be among the first to get access to our nature-backed tokens. And let's talk more on our Earth Savers Discord channel. Enjoy the show.
Hello, Yoann. Welcome to NatureBacked.
Hey, good to be here.
To start off, tell us a few words about Climentum. What's the kind of Climentum story?
Sure. Climentum is based out of Denmark. It's domiciled as a fund in Denmark, but we're based in Berlin, Copenhagen, and Stockholm. We have 5 partners. Our target fund size is 150 million, and we invest in late seed and Series A climate tech startups. So only in cases that at full scale can reduce 1 million tons CO2.
Okay.
It's Article 9 fund, so one of the new gen impact climate funds. And we officially announced the first close in July.
Okay. And I think the official size of first close was not disclosed, right?
Yeah, it's always a bit tricky to disclose those things, but I would say ballpark half the fund size.
Okay.
And now we're looking to do our final close very soon.
It's a good time for the fund to be fundraising, right?
It couldn't be better.
I mean, seriously or not seriously?
No, it's a bit tricky. The microeconomics, everyone is back to safety and risk averse, so it's a little tricky. But the climate agenda is still very top of minds for most institutions. So we hope that things will progress well.
I think how many investments have you guys already made?
We announced the fund in July. We've done 2 deals officially closed in July, and we are working on 3 others right now.
Okay.
So hopefully by November we'll have 2 more announced.
The 2 of July were public. Can you tell a few words about them?
Sure. So the first one was a company based out of Denmark called Continuum. They tackle the big challenge of composite material recycling. So think of those enormous wind turbines that are end of first generation. Denmark, for example, is one of the leaders in deployment of wind, and it typically takes 20 up to 25 years for a wind turbine to deteriorate, right? And one of the first parts that deteriorates is the blades, because it's made of composite materials. It's also what's capturing the wind. And unfortunately, we don't know how to recycle those things. It's just very complex. It's made of resins and heavy metals and composites that are high grade, but very difficult to disassemble. And the EU is now trying to enforce penalties on those big wind parks that are not doing anything to recycle. It is just very hard to recycle. Today, they're just landfilled, buried. You would not believe it. But in Denmark or in other places, we're digging giant holes 3 to 9 meters deep to just bury those enormous 30-meter wind blades. And so Continuum has created a mechanical recycling process to not use any kind of chemical and to make it hyper efficient so that we downcycle. So we don't upcycle in the sense that we cannot recreate wind blades out of it, but we downcycle into wood cement panels that are used for the construction space. Wow. So it's a very interesting case, and it's probably an illustration of a case that we'll invest in the most in our portfolio is those hardware deep tech, industrial cases that have the highest potential of CO2 reduction, but they require quite a bit of capital to scale. And so this round is really the equity round is unleashing the firepower of infrastructure funds or large private equity plays that will then finance the construction of multiple facilities. Right. So this equity round is for the first facility west of Denmark, and then will come in 2024, the second, the third, and the fourth facility, and it will just go globally in cities or in areas that need it the most.
Mm. And it's kind of the classical, chicken and egg, or how do you describe this problem when the companies are kind of doing really good with wind farming, but they had the waste which was, non-recyclable in a way until now.
It is just more of a timing issue. For the past 20 years, we were just trying to push the wind agenda, not really thinking about what happens after, the end of life cycle one. And so now we're sitting on top of a pile, millions of those wind blades, and we have to address that. It is an environmental problem, right? If you try to burn this, is terrible, but it's also an opportunity because you have raw material that could be used as a replacement or as an alternative to other materials in the construction space.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other investment?
Sure. The other investment is called 1.5. It's out of Hamburg. We invested alongside Speed Invest, Planet A Ventures, New Generation Fund, and others. So the idea is to tackle the problem of plastics recycling. We're not obsessed with recycling. It just happens to be two cases back to back. So plastics, really, the EU and other places in the world have enforced the ban on single-use plastics. So that's a good step in the right direction. We don't use plastic bags anymore, those thin layer bags, but you still see plastics everywhere, right? From the sachets of mayonnaise or ketchup that you see in restaurants to those packaging that you see in milk, or a lot of 90% of the consumer-based products still use some form of plastics. The problem of this is it's not a single layer plastic. It typically has a coating that's made of PET, polyethylene. It's made out of aluminum. It has multiple barriers for temperature, humidity, and a lot of different layers, right? Up to 9 layers in this. So to recycle this, you would need to separate every individual layer. No one knows how to do it, and I bet you they probably won't in the future. So 1.5 is developing an alternative that is paper-based. Okay. But you need to create a paper alternative for each of those layers. So that will take time. And so we have the way this industry works today is you have the Nestle, the big food companies that just source this plastic packaging from the enormous, packaging producers. Mm-hmm. Those are enormous companies that just, print those kilometers of just layers. And those guys don't have R&D departments, or they have no intention to change the core business model. So you need to source those patents or those innovation from where it lives today, which is universities or, labs that have not really found a commercial application for it or a product market fit. So 1.5 is sourcing patents, assembling the team so that they can stress test that and then take it to scale by assembling those innovations together. Today, and the goal for 2023 is to have the first application in those sachets that I mentioned, for mayonnaise and ketchup. The idea is to commercialize to one of those enormous plastic processors. And then eventually they want to, make through a dominoes effect, go through each barrier at a time, right? So the goal is over 2023 and in the upcoming years to produce a paper-based alternative for each of those layers. And if they manage to go through the 5 barriers, this is the holy grail of packaging, and it could be worth billions. So we're betting on the fact that they can get there before anyone else, create enough defensibility, but also alleviate an enormous problem.
You basically, was it 1 million tons of CO2 is the minimal climate target for the startups you're investing in?
That's right.
Where does it come from? What's the logic behind the 1 million ton?
Yeah, so for us, it's a floor. We are Article 9 fund. That means that this is the highest level of transparency on green finance these days. This is all the new generation of climate funds tend to be Article 9. It doesn't make sense to be lower than that now, because it's not considered as the highest grade. And we start seeing private equity firms going in that direction. That means that you need to monitor each of your portfolio companies, what they do to reduce carbon, but also can they reach the total potential. For us, 1 million ton means that it excludes a lot of applications. It's just not easy. We've been seeing, gigatons, 1,000 million tons being thrown around. But if you really go after what it materially means for scope 1, 2, 3, particularly scope 3 emissions, it's actually pretty high. That means that we cannot do software or straight software applications because the impact is not direct, it's indirect. So hardware, generally deep tech, with a layer of software to enable scalability tends to be the name of the game. And how do you monitor the million ton CO2? Well, we tend to invest at early stage, right? So late seed when the company is 10, 20, 30 employees, and they generally don't generate a ton of commercial revenues. So it's very hard to make, it's a game of predictions.
Of course.
So typically start with a back of the envelope calculation, trying to consider every part of the value chain, the suppliers, who the customers are, where the technology gets shipped to or used. And then it gives you an indication whether you're in a high end CO2 potential or more in the medium range, in which case you probably need to dig deeper. But to confirm your inspiration or your intuition on those calculations, you need to conduct a life cycle assessment, right? So analysis, it's LCA. It's also the new norm or becoming standard in that field. But conducting a full LCA requires quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time. So we would do a full LCA at the end of the fund. So when we divest an investment, but we conduct a pre-LCA upfront. A pre-LCA, we have one partner that's fully dedicated to it. His name is Stefan. He comes from that world, knows the field inside out, and uses a software to make calculations. He can go pretty deep, very granular. And sometimes when cases are really tricky and edgy, we externalize that. We use external consultants that really specialize in certain verticals, so they can get access to more and more data.
I lost my thought there for a second. The 1 million ton logic calculations, does it mean that you mentioned the basically hardware and maybe with a software component for scalability, and looking at the first couple of examples of the companies you've been investing in, does it mean that their kind of material technologies are really kind of maybe the most likely targets for you guys?
Yeah, it typically to move CO2, you need to move atoms, molecules. It's typically involving physics or some element of chemical reaction. So it has to be material based or, an industry that are really hard to decarbonize.
So probably, I'm sure you're looking at construction and probably transport.
That's right. So we have 6 general sectors. It is so broad that we tend to focus on strike zones. We call it strike zones. I can come back to that later. But the 6 sectors
is that baseball?
It's more a military term, to zero in a particular target.
Okay.
To be hyper specific. When you're thesis driven, you need to be very specific on what the targets area are. So the 6 sectors is waste and materials. We use agriculture and food tech. There's the construction space, mobility. There's next gen renewables, which for us means not wind and solar. Those are commodities by now. It's not VCs that should invest in this field anymore. It's more private equity and growth infra funds. So for us, next gen renewables is geothermal, it's hydrogen, it's small modular nuclear reactors, those kind of new ways to generate energy.
We are Bragg, makers of the tried and true apple cider vinegar that you've had in your cabinet for as long as you've had a cabinet. And you trust that bottle sitting in your cabinet because we were in your mom's cabinet and her mom's cabinet. You use us as a wellness drink. Your mom used us in salad dressing. Her mom's mom used us as glass cleaner. And while there are many ways to use us, one thing is always the same, our recipe. It has never changed since we've been put in cabinets. Bragg, it's not weird if it works.
This new energy field has probably seen a massive boost in Europe, right?
Energy?
Yes.
Energy, well, there's the historical energy, right? Clean Tech 1.0, the wave, which we don't need to come back to. It's been challenging, but where we see a boost now is very much on hydrogen. There's really a mandate from countries in Germany, in the UK, in France, or in the Nordics. They're really trying to develop production and utility on hydrogen. But we're seeing, because of the war in Ukraine, any ways to reduce the electricity bill is now top of the agenda. So heat pumps is one form of, that is very tangible to you and me, any consumer, is you install or you retrofit your gas boiler with a heat pump that will just pump, the heat or lower at least your electricity bill. We're looking at one case very actively in the Nordics.
Yeah, the several investors I've been speaking to on this show have been mentioning heat pumps, something they would have not thought 2 years ago they would ever invest in, but suddenly they are the hottest commodity out there.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons for it. Is heat pumps are warm and hype at the moment because of the timing. As often you need to base your investment thesis on timing. Timing is the number one driver of a success in the startup, investment space. And timing now is the right timing for heat pumps to go mainstream. Now, is it equity? Is it VC money that should finance this, or is it private equity or government funding through subsidies? It's yet to be seen, but we believe certain cases that require exponentiality and to go really, really to dominate should be backed by VC.
That makes all the sense in the world, of course. But when Europe is talking about the energy problems, the shortage of energy, and the gas lines being exploded, and all this kind of stuff, and at the same time, there's new energies, the energy sources. They usually tend to be like long-term investments. So how these two will match? Do we have some kind of empty hole in the middle, which is filled maybe with LNG tankers or something like that?
Well, this is I think you're referring to the fact that we should, there's end goal technology or innovation, where we live in a world and there's transitory technology. Right?
You're probably going too philosophical on this. I was trying to have a look more of the kind of the layman's view on the current situation, where when you read in the newspapers how Europe is, having its shortages, or prices are skyrocketing on some things and so on energy field. And then we are talking about the investments in the kind of new energy technologies, which typically tend to take time until they actually have, vast impact on the society. There seems to be some kind of the hole between the two there.
Sure. Well, it still puzzles me, right? Living in Berlin, that Germany is still keeping coal power plants, active for another couple of years, right? They decided to keep the last 3 active for TBD. It could be 3, 4, 10 years, who knows? Because there's such a energy demand and a shortage at the moment. So LNG terminals is another problem. Today, you need to find gas somewhere, right? The pipelines, Nord Streams are out. You need to source gas from the Gulf, from Northern Africa, from Norway, or even from the US. And I've even heard that the Koreans, which is really good at manufacturing things. They can do things in such high capacity very quick. Now they're producing 80% of the methane or the super tankers carrying gas around the world. It's just an insane boom in their industry. So I don't know how long this will last. Hopefully not too long, but we need to find more suitable and sustainable solutions. So I think unfortunately our leaders, political leaders, are too short-sighted. They're just responding to this crisis as they responded to COVID, as they will respond to the next crisis. I think it would be a great moment to just pause, reflect, and then choose the course, to be a bit more visionary, looking at 10, 15, 20 years out. Now is an opportunity to do it. Unfortunately, they're just, losing this opportunity.
But if you would be running Germany or France or EU, what would you be doing now? You would be taking that pause, and where would you be looking at?
Well, I'm going to use this question as a just as a way to zoom out, right? From,
of course,
from where we stand as a civilization and the risks that are coming. So, I think it's high time we updated the rules of the game. Capitalism 2.0 needs to take into account externalities. So it's just a problem of regulation, really. And regulation has a bad rap. So let's call it rules of the game instead. So I'm giving you a blunt reality of capitalism 1.0. Raising the GDP isn't complicated. You ask workers to make holes on Monday, fill them up on Tuesday. You dig them again on Wednesday and fill them up on Thursday. And this accounts for growth. This is what millions of workers do every day around the globe. It's unfulfilling jobs, nonsensical, potentially harmful for the environment. So another reality of 1.0, just to to beat the nail in the head. Today, an organization can be hugely financially profitable while laying off thousands of employees, increasing work pressure, boosting inequality, discriminating against women, undermining democracy, and destroying nature. It's not only entirely possible, but is almost the norm, especially in a recession. So when this accentuates to the extreme and can lead to your own extinction, I think if we are truly Homo sapiens sapiens, we should change the rules of the game. So I hope it won't take a bloody revolution to get there, or another COVID scale crisis. But as of 2022, our political leaders don't seem to have fully awakened to the danger ahead of us. So if you've asked me in 2020 for a game of prediction of what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future and what should happen, I think we might be 1 year behind what my general gut feeling was. The first dozen of Article 9 climate funds, I predicted that in 2021, and it seems to happen more in 2022. So this will expand to hundreds. I think it's just a natural course of things. The 100 laying the path for thousands of ecosystem players by 2025. You'll see specialized accelerators, incubators, fund of funds, micro VC funds, vertical specific funds, and next gen CVCs. We can come back to this later. This idea of a corporate trying to play a role in VC, but still renaming differently than what they've done in the past, CVCs. By 2027, 2028, we will see a rush in M&A. I think this is bound to happen. There's no other, for corporates to meet their 2030 targets, they will have to buy the shit out of all the companies that are doing something for the climate, particularly the ones with high CO2 reduction. And I'll stop my game of predictions at 2030. The majority of corporations and governments will be vastly behind in terms of commitments to the 2030 targets and the Paris Agreement. Yeah. So it will be interesting to see what unfolds, right? Is it going to be another tsunami of greenwashing? Are governments going to point at each other? Or will they finally be taking the opportunity to the rules of capitalism 2.0? That's yet to be seen.
My cynical prediction is that the greenwashing game has already started. I think blaming game we see in every year at the UN COP meetings. There's always the others who are the ones to blame. That's, human nature probably. And as it's, not as sudden for most of the people of the earth as COVID was. I mean, people in Pakistan do understand the, impacts of the climate change very kind of on their skin these days, but not the kind of not the politicians who make the calls. So I think we'll see, cynical me is really kind of feeling sorry almost about the situation and trying to change something.
Yeah. Did you read the book, The Ministry for the Future?
No, but I've seen many people referring to it and comparing it also to our company, the Single Earth.
Mm-hmm. I think this is probably one of the books that impacted me the most in 2022. I got offered for Christmas, and I kind of, I don't like the mainstream books. I just kind of tend to dismiss them. But this one, I really spent the time, and it's mind-boggling of reality. It's really looking into the future and what's going to unfold of our civilization. But it is a utopia. So we're dreamers. You're doing this podcast, but I'm also running a VC fund because we believe there is a way out, even if it's just a little tiny hole that we need to sneak through. But the Ministry for the Future paints a gloomy reality over the next 20, 30 years. Humanity will hit bottom before we bounce back. And that seems unavoidable. It's just always as you transition from civilization to civilization, it's either Schumpeterian or Darwinian as a organic evolution. I would bet more of a Schumpeterian, but more of a brutal reality.
But of course, changes are the things which create opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
And you are especially in the the VCs are in the opportunities game, right? If there is an untapped opportunity, that's the business case.
Yeah. So the VCs really play a role, but we are a fraction, of what's necessary out there, right? But VCs tend to be trendsetters. We're setting the trend for the bigger capital stack. And the private equity comes next, the financial institutions, the government funds, and then you go up and up, in pockets that are much, much deeper and manage billions. We are yet another intermediary in this whole capital flow. So the more funds you see out there, this is why there's no competition. People are saying we're competing for nothing. We're competing for 100 million funds, but that doesn't move the needle. We need more and more of those because we together can create a network effect, a network effect that just moves the needle and then forces everyone to just become Article 9 and then push the Capital 2.0 rules, forward. And so it's just the one brick in this bigger transformation.
You were earlier referring to the Greek corporations and their CVCs and said you would like to maybe come back to this. What were you talking about?
Historically, corporations have been poor at driving innovation. It tends to be from smaller organizations because the incentive mechanism is not there, right? Why would you change your core business model if your shareholders are happy, you're generating revenues, and then you're benefiting? You're the winner of that current game. So as the game transforms and new rules are set, they will have to adapt. And they've been trying to adapt historically by creating CVCs or corporate venture capital firms, essentially just trying to incentivize a few guys with a high salary, but very low carry internally. And we know that it doesn't work. If it's not your baby and you don't see the carrot at the end, you just don't you don't expose yourself.
Exactly.
So now we're seeing that model shift a little bit, right? We see large corporations inventing, I call it CVC 2.0, is rebranded funds with external partners that are incentivized with carry. Not as much as if you were to build your own fund, but you can leverage a platform, you can leverage your brand, and then typically the funders or the clients of your own platform shrinks the fundraising window, right? So instead of taking 2 years, it might take you 6 months. And so we're seeing more and more of those CVC 2.0 pop. And I predict that there will be more and more. Each corporate will try to do the same thing. So that will probably lead the next stage of this climate tech transformation. And then financial institutions will do the same thing. And then government funds will create fund of funds, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's very hard to predict how this whole ecosystem and all the bricks, how they're going to fall. It's a Tetris game a little bit, but it's going in that good direction, I believe.
And in Tetris game, when it goes in a good direction, then the screen is empty, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Tetris game, you end up losing. Hopefully there's no, it's a positive sum game now.
Yes, hopefully. Looking forward, I mean, we started off in a little bit, maybe melancholy note of the downturn and things like this. How do you look forward into the end of 22 and 23?
Sure. Well, it's almost 2 years, two months out. I believe that a ton will change by the end of the year. And I really am looking much. You need to zoom out, right? As a VC, this is a game where you bet on a decade and then a decade of transformation. And I will just again say that I suspect the climate was the Capitalism 2.0 rules of the game to be laid out at the transition towards the next decade. So end of 2020s and towards the 2030s. I can give you sort of my hint, really, where things should head. And I believe people wake up, as the water is rising. And so the general rules of Capitalism 2.0 that we'll see at the end of this decade is a high price on carbon. I think people will wake up that the current price is just ridiculous. It doesn't incentivize the players as much as it should. We'll see a negative incentive or penalty structure for travels and moving goods. So the fact that today no one gets penalized by moving things across 5 continents, it's just nonsense, right? It needs to be taken into account. Another one is high taxes on imports. Again, why? This is people that don't realize, and I don't understand why at the top of economies, especially in Europe, it seems so obvious to me that especially the southern economies, Spain, Portugal, Italy, but also France, are suffering from a deficit, right, in their commercial balance. They're importing more than they're exporting. So why don't they increase the taxes on import, or which would probably rebalance the economy, and there will be more players relocalizing, industry locally. And that means that they would reduce imports or increase revenues from the imports, and then increase the export. If you manage to reestablish a bit of a positive or neutral balance, you solve all the problems. You solve unemployment. You solve the fact that we don't manage to finance the healthcare. You solve the retirement problems, and you solve a lot of the issues. I don't understand why they're not applying this. Some people say it's because of the lobby of a handful of organizations that gain too much, but because they're the winners of the export game. But at this point, there are not that many, and the government should think about how to use taxes more in that direction.
True. Government should think that's a good positive note. To wrap it up, thanks, Yoann, for your time today, and we'll meet at the next climate conference, surely.
Thanks very much for having me on the show, and happy to meet.
Thanks. Join us again for the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please give us a good rating and leave the feedback in your podcast player so others will find it too. We will be back next week. Turn on to NatureBacked podcast.
Are you ready to write? Are you ready to become a published writer? Then tune in and take notes, because each week on Simply Write with Polly, we cover writing craft, the ins and outs of running a writing business, and we'll also hear from some big name authors about how they get their work done and published so that we can learn to do it too. Join us each week right here on the Creators Network of Electrocast for Simply Write with Polly.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wanna-Bet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wanna-Bet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.